Hello there. The Brexit referendum was a campaign for every vote. Proponents often promise the farmers, you could say the moon. But what is the reality? More of a blue miracle after 3 years of leaving the EU. Being a farmer means adapting to circumstances, no matter how adverse they may be. And that's farmers Mark Boyer's motto, for example. He has found his niche south of London in greens. He grows spinach, broccoli, and spices on 400 hectares. A seasonal business in which he relies on around 100 workers from Eastern Europe, especially in the warmer months. Three-quarters of his people have been coming for years and have the coveted settled status. In other words, the right acquired before Brexit to return to Great Britain and work again and again. That's why Boyer relies on them. All farmers report that it's practically impossible to find Brits for the back-breaking job. The government has therefore set up a visa program for harvest workers from all over the world. 30,000 visas a year, that's okay, at least for Boyer. But the Farmer Association said it should have been 70,000. Then panic broke out among the associations. There was talk of crop failures and supply bottlenecks. But Boyer thinks it wasn't that bad. Nevertheless, fruit and vegetables worth 25 million euros rotted in British fields last year, and every third farmer was affected. It just had to go on somehow. That's a motto that describes the Brexit mood in Britain 3 years after the official exit day. It just has to go on somehow. But Boyer says he himself is lucky. His products all end up on the domestic market. Because the paperwork that is now necessary when exporting to Europe is bad for many other farms. It means millions in additional costs for meat farmers, for example, whose products go to 70% of those go to the EU. And there have not yet been any major plant closures, but the future prospects for farmers in the country are indeed uncertain. The Brexit supporters had promised the farmers three things. The EU subsidies, which account for up to 60% of the income of all farmers and are vital for more than a third, would be replaced on an equal footing. Then, new trade agreements would create more opportunities, while exchanges with the EU would remain just as easy. Well, experts say these promises have not been kept, and you don't have to be an expert to see that. It's still unclear how exactly the subsidies from Brussels are to be replaced, but only this much is clear: the pot will contain around 35% less money. And they want it to be produced greener. Environmental compatibility is becoming an important benchmark, not just the size of the company. And that is a big change. And what is really happening explains Sean Rickard, longtime chief economist at the largest farmers association, the NFU. And he says it's significantly less money for farmers, plus a lot of paperwork and effort to get the new state aid. And according to Rickard, in the future, farmers will only be paid to set aside land. After Brexit, around 330,000 workers from the EU turned their backs on the country. And this is a result of a study just published by the London think tank Centre for European Reform. And agriculture is most affected. The government's visa programs are also not sufficient to compensate for the loss, according to the study. Irunas is also convinced that this gap will continue to grow. He's a Lithuanian that is a tractor driver on Mark Boyer's farm. More and more harvest workers are finding better paying jobs in other EU countries, he says, or now in EU countries. And that without bureaucratic hurdles and expensive visas. And traveling there is not that difficult. And the pound has gotten a lot weaker, which means they are getting less and less money in comparison in euros for the same job. And his conclusion is, there are fewer and fewer of us, it's not getting better. The biggest broken promise, however, are the new trade agreements that are supposed to give British farmers new sales markets. And Rickard is talking about this, but I said the same a lot on this channel. The government treats us like idiots. She knows that London can only conclude contracts with countries that have huge agricultural markets, the ones that are much cheaper to produce and which British farmers could not compete with in terms of price. And the long-term goal is just cheaper food. However, this is only achieved because the same high production standards do not apply outside of Europe. Inferior goods would slowly but surely replace domestic products. And that was mainly due to the trade agreements with Australia and New Zealand. Even the British Minister of Agriculture, who was involved in the negotiations, declared after his dismissal that the agreements would seriously damage British agriculture. So 3 years of Brexit only mean broken promises. That's also the tenor among the officials. They have been betrayed and sold. We have been slaughtered on the altar of Brexit, said Rickard. And altar is quite a fitting term here. Uwe was quite right in the comments on one of my videos a few days ago on this topic. If you listen to Brexiteers nowadays, Brexit now sounds more like a cult than politics. And I'll see you in my next video. I'll be back.